If you were watching Formula 1 in 2008, you may remember Bernie Ecclestone proposing that the sport drop its traditional point scoring system and adopt a medal system akin to that of the Olympics. In 2002, Michael Schumacher won his 5th driver's title almost 3 months before the end of the season, and with 6 races remaining. As well as this unparalleled dominance, the 2002 season had been a sinfully boring one. So for 2003, a revised points system was introduced that gave less weight to race victories, which in part helped to create an intense 3-way battle for the championship, which still ended up being won by Schumacher. 5 years on, discussions about the points system were starting again, as it was felt that awarding only 2 points extra for winning over finishing second meant that there was less impetus to go for the win and created far less interesting races. So, as a possible solution, Bernie proposed a medal system, whereby instead of awarding points to the top 8 finishers, the winner would receive a gold medal, second place a silver, and third place a bronze. And at the end of the season, the driver with the most gold medals, i.e. the most wins, would be crowned champion, with ties being broken based on the number of silver and bronze medals and then count back on the next best finishes. The Constructors Championship, however, would have remained unchanged and would have kept the traditional points system. The short-term gains are pretty clear, as if you wanted any chance of being champion, you would have to go for the win at every single race instead of playing the long game and settling for second or third. However, it does mean that consistency, which is how most drivers win championships, is now meaningless, unless you're consistently winning races. It also means that you now have a 20-car grid, but only the top 3 receive any rewards or gains, which brings back memories of the early 90s, where we had a 26-car grid with only the top 6 getting any points. Naturally, this idea was thrown out, and the current point system that's been in place since 2019 works perfectly well. But what if they had adopted this? Hell, what if this had been in place since the very beginning of Formula 1? Time for another alternate history video. Let's go back to 1950 and see how each championship would have unfolded with an Olympic-style medals system. In 1950, it was common to see more than 20 drivers per race, with only the top 5 receiving points. However, this worked well, as barely half the grid would often finish the races. A close battle between the Alfa Romeos of Giuseppe Farina and Juan Manuel Fangio saw Farina become Formula 1's first drivers' champion. With medals, this is still the case, but straight off the bat we already have a tie, with 3 gold medals apiece. As with in real life, Fangio goes into the final round as championship leader, but a faulty gearbox gives the win and the title to Farina. Farina wins on countback, as outside of his 3 wins he had a 4th and a 7th, whereas Fangio had 3 retirements. A couple of issues we have in the 1950s is that this system ends up giving a disproportionately large amount of weight to the Indy 500 runners, as Johnny Parsons raced only in that but won it, and so ends up 3rd in the standings. We also have the complication of shared drives, in which any points scored was shared between the drivers. For those, in the event of a deadlock, I've decided that shared drives are worth half that of solo drives. (1951) saw a battle between Fangio and the Ferrari of Alberto Ascari, with Fangio redeeming himself for 1950 and taking the title at the final round in Spain. With medals, he and Ascari go into the final round tied, with Ascari ahead on countback, but by winning, Fangio still takes the title. (1952) was a cakewalk for Alberto Ascari, who won 6 of the 7 races he started and clinched the title in Germany with 2 rounds remaining. With medals, it's the same story, but Giuseppe Farina goes from runner-up to 4th, behind a driver that did only 1 race but won it. (1953) was closer, but still a fairly easy victory for Ascari, who won the title at the penultimate round in Switzerland. With medals, he wins the title a round earlier, once again in Germany, with no other driver getting more than a single win. The title went back to Fangio in 1954, who clinched it, also in Switzerland, with 2 rounds remaining. With medals, he once again takes the title in Switzerland, with once again no other driver getting more than a single win. Fangio secured his record-breaking third driver's title in 1955 at the penultimate round at Silverstone with Mercedes in their final year as a constructor before their return in 2010, in a year marred by the death of Ascari and the Le Mans disaster. With medals, he still takes the title at Silverstone, and yet again, no one else gets more than a single win. Title number 4 came for Fangio in 1956. This time, however, it was much closer, going down to the wire with Peter Collins. Collins, however, sportingly handed his car and the title to Fangio after Fangio's car broke down, and in the process lost the runners-up spot to Stirling Moss. With medals, the same thing happens, but Collins remains runner-up. Fangio clinched an unprecedented 5th driver's title at the German Grand Prix in 1957, with 2 rounds remaining. With medals, he once again does so in Germany, with Stirling Moss only having a single win at that point. (1958) saw Formula One's first British champion, with Mike Hawthorn being effectively handed the title by Stirling Moss after Moss vouched to have Hawthorn's disqualification from second in Portugal reversed, who was then killed in a car accident 3 months later. It was also the first year of the Constructors Championship, being won by Van Wall. With medals, however, at long last we finally have a new champion, going down to the wire instead between Moss and Tony Brooks. Here we see the issues with consistency with medals, as Hawthorn won only 1 race but finished second 5 times, which eliminates him from the fight after the penultimate round in Italy, but it does mean that Moss finally gets the title many feel he deserved. (1959) was the year Jack Brabham got his first title, securing it at the final round at Sebring. With medals, Brabham, Brooks and Moss are all in contention in the final round, but with none of them winning it, the title still goes to Brabham. So, at the close of the 1950s, we see that very little changes, with only one new champion. Having so few races per season means that the medal system on the whole isn't significantly different from the original points system. And here's the top 10 on the overall medals tally. Jack Brabham kicked off the 1960s by defending the title, winning 5 races in a row and clinching the title in Portugal with 2 rounds remaining. With his 5th gold medal, he clinches it once again in Portugal, with Stirling Moss finishing runner-up for a 3rd time. (1961) saw a titanic battle between the Ferraris of Phil Hill and Wolfgang von Trips, which ended with von Trips' death at the Italian Grand Prix, handing Hill the title by 1 point. With medals, it's the same result, only now Moss is much more of a contender, and would have been champion if he hadn't retired from the lead at the season finale at Watkins Glen, which Ferrari and Hill withdrew from out of respect for von Trips and as they had already secured both titles. Here we get an interesting dilemma when it comes to the official results, because changes to point systems will naturally affect drivers' race strategies, which was the point of introducing medals in the first place. Something a lot of people picked up on in my video using the modern point system is that the famous title-deciding collisions in the 80s and 90s more than likely would not have happened, and in this circumstance, Hill and Ferrari more than likely would have travelled across the pond to fight for the driver's title, which Hill would have won regardless with Moss's retirement. (1962) saw Graham Hill take his first title at the final round in South Africa after main rival Jim Clark retired 4 times from pole. With medals, it's the same story, once again going down to the wire. Clark bounced back in 1963 and won the title in Italy with a record 3 races remaining, with almost double the points of Hill. With medals, he wins in Italy once again, bringing back the kind of dominant performances of Ascari and Fangio in the previous decade. In 1964, John Surtees claimed the title by 1 point from Graham Hill and became the first world champion on both 2 and 4 wheels. With medals, however, remarkably, neither of them wins the title, and it instead goes to Jim Clark again, who leads the championship from the second round onwards, with Surtees and Hill both needing to win the final round to be champion, which was won by Dan Gurney. Clark dominated once again in 1965 by winning 6 of the first 7 races and took his second title in Germany, once again with 3 rounds remaining. With medals, it's the same as 1963, though Richie Ginther jumps from 7th to 4th in the standings. Jack Brabham made a comeback in 1966 to take his 3rd title in Italy with 2 rounds remaining in a car of his own design. With medals, he takes the title in Italy as well, in a year with one of the worst finishing records in the sport's history, meaning Jim Clark jumps from 6th to 3rd. Denny Hulme was champion in 1967, beating teammate and boss Jack Brabham by 5 points. With medals, however, it's title number 4 for Jim Clark, who comes from behind and wins the final 2 rounds after tying with both drivers. Graham Hill took his 2nd title in 1968, a groundbreaking year for Formula 1 that saw the first aerodynamic wings on the cars, but also marred by the death of Jim Clark. With medals, it still goes to Hill, who was behind Jackie Stewart going into the final round in Mexico, but benefits from the mechanical misfortunes of Stewart and Denny Hulme to win and take the title. (1969) was the year Jackie Stewart won his first title, dominating and winning in Italy with 3 rounds remaining. A 6th win in Italy once again gives him the title there, and not winning any races means Bruce McLaren drops from 3rd to 7th. So, in the 1960s, there are some significant changes. John Surtees and Denny Hulme both lose their titles, and the obvious star of the show is Jim Clark, who when his car was working was basically unbeatable. And here we have the medals tally at the close of the decade. In 1970, Jochen Rindt was so dominant that despite being killed in qualifying at the Italian Grand Prix, he still became Formula 1's first and so far only posthumous world champion at the penultimate round at Watkins Glen, having died a month earlier. With medals, he is crowned champion barely 24 hours after his death, as he had 5 wins, and with Clay Regazzoni winning the race, there are 5 drivers who each have 1, with 3 races remaining. Jackie Stewart took his 2nd title in 1971 with almost double the points of runner-up Ronnie Peterson, retiring in Austria but still securing it with 3 rounds remaining. With medals, he wins again in Austria, with this being the 5th season where only one driver wins more than 1 race. Stewart was beaten to the title in 1972 by Emerson Fittipaldi, who won it in Italy with 2 rounds remaining. With medals, the result is unchanged, despite Stewart winning the final 2 rounds. Stewart won his 3rd title in 1973, and having made major pushes for improved safety standards across his career, retired at the final round at Watkins Glen following the death of teammate Francois Sever, having already secured the title 2 rounds earlier in Italy. With medals, Ronnie Peterson leads the championship until the 10th round in the Netherlands, where Stewart takes the lead and then the title at the penultimate round in Canada. The late Sever not winning any races means he drops from 4th to 6th. In 1974, Emerson Fittipaldi took his second title, in a close battle with Clay Regazzoni going down to the wire. With medals, however, Regazzoni plummets from 2nd to 6th, and it's Ronnie Peterson who is in contention with Fittipaldi in the final round but ultimately loses out. (1975) saw Niki Lauda claim his first title at the penultimate round in Italy, having achieved 9 pole positions across the year. With medals, nothing much changes, despite 9 drivers winning a race. (1976) is of course the famous year of the intense rivalry between Niki Lauda and James Hunt, immortalised in the 2013 movie Rush. Lauda came back from the brink of death after his crash at the Nürburgring and made a heroic comeback, but voluntarily retired from the final race and lost the title by 1 point. With medals, it still goes to Hunt, and for Lauda to have won the title, regardless of his withdrawal, he would have had to have won the final race rather than just finish 5th. Niki Lauda won his second title with ease in 1977 and after doing so withdrew from the final 2 rounds due to his deteriorating relationship with Ferrari. With medals, it's Mario Andretti who takes the title in the pioneering Lotus 78, and so for Lauda to take the title, he would have been forced to compete in the final 2 rounds and win at least one of them, with Andretti not winning the other in order to still be champion. Andretti got pole in both but finished 9th in one and retired from the other, so this easily could have been done. (1978) sparked the aerodynamic revolution in Formula 1 with the ground effect of the Lotus 79 dominating and giving Mario Andretti the title in Italy, which was marred by the death of teammate Ronnie Peterson. With medals, Andretti clinches it 1 round earlier in the Netherlands, with Carlos Reutemann as runner-up. Ground effect was in full swing in 1979, and the superior reliability of Ferrari meant Jody Scheckter and Gilles Villeneuve stormed ahead, with Scheckter taking the title in Italy with 2 rounds remaining. With medals, both drivers lose the title to the Williams of Alan Jones, who secures it at the final round at Watkins Glen, which Scheckter needed to win to take the title, despite having only 2 retirements to Jones's 7. The 1970s are broadly the same, except for the final 3 seasons, with Andretti now winning 2 titles and Jones winning 1 a year early. And here is the medals tally at the end of the decade. Alan Jones kicked off the 1980s by winning his first and only title relatively comfortably at the penultimate round in Canada. With medals, he successfully defends the title and wins it for a second time, also in Canada. Nelson Piquet won his first title in 1981 at the final round at Caesars Palace by just 1 point from Carlos Reutemann, with the top 5 separated by only 7. With medals, however, it instead goes to Alain Prost in only his second year in the sport, clinching it with second place at Caesars Palace, who finished only 6 races but did all of them on the podium. (1982) was a tumultuous year that saw the deaths of Gilles Villeneuve and Riccardo Paletti and the FISA-FOCA war reach its climax. It was a closely fought season where no driver won more than 2 races, and the title was eventually won by Keke Rosberg at the final round, again at Caesars Palace. With medals, it remarkably is won by Didier Pironi, who broke both his legs in a crash at the Hockenheim Ring, missed the final 5 rounds and never raced in Formula 1 again before his untimely death in 1987, who would be forced to watch himself become champion from his hospital bed. He is one of 6 drivers in contention for the title in the final round, but secures it with none of them winning the race. 1983 saw the bounding of ground effect and heralded the beginning of the turbo era, with Nelson Piquet clinching his second title at the final round in South Africa. With medals, Alain Prost denies Piquet the title once again, also clinching it in South Africa, with René Arnoux also being in contention. Niki Lauda won his third title in 1984 at the final round in Portugal by just half a point from teammate Prost. With medals, Prost becomes a three-time champion, coming from behind by winning the final two rounds and also securing it in Portugal. Prost won his first title in 1985 fairly comfortably, securing it at Brands Hatch with 2 rounds remaining. With medals, he breezes his way to his fourth title, also securing it at Brands Hatch, having led from the 4th round onwards. Prost came from behind Nigel Mansell and Nelson Piquet to secure his second title in 1986, doing so at a dramatic final round in Australia. With medals, the title goes to Mansell. Prost is ruled out at the penultimate round in Mexico City, and despite his famous tyre blowout, it still goes to Mansell as Piquet fails to win in Adelaide. Nelson Piquet took his third title in 1987 in the monstrously powerful Williams FW11B, securing the title the night before the penultimate round in Japan after teammate Mansell crashed in qualifying and injured his back and subsequently flew home. With medals, Mansell defends the title and secures it a round earlier by winning in Mexico City, with Alain Prost also still being a contender at that point. (1988) saw the start of the infamous Prost-Senna rivalry, who were completely untouchable and between them won all but one race, with Senna taking his first title at the penultimate round in Japan. With medals, he secures it in Japan once again, with every other driver mathematically eliminated after Belgium, the round before Gerhard Berger's sole win in Italy. The Prost-Senna rivalry ramped up in 1989 with their famous collision at Suzuka, which saw Prost retire and Senna go on to win but then be disqualified for incorrectly rejoining the track, giving Prost his third title. With medals, Senna wins his second title, and even with his disqualification, Prost's retirement means he still secures it at Suzuka. In his desperation, I think we can assume that in this scenario Prost still would have pulled that move. So, with medals, the 1980s is completely turned on its head, with 7 seasons seeing a new champion, and Nelson Piquet being denied all 3 of his. And here we have the medals tally at the end of the decade. The 90s began with the Prost-Senna rivalry reaching its climax, with Senna getting his own back and taking Prost out at the start of the penultimate round, also at Suzuka, and securing his second title. With medals, he wins his third title. He wins it at Suzuka once again, and so there is still the incentive to take Prost out. His reasoning was partly his dissatisfaction with the pole position slot being moved to the dirty side of the grid, which meant Prost took the lead at the start, but also the disqualification the previous year that gave Prost the title, which in this scenario would not have taken the title from Senna. Regardless of whether Prost went on to win in Suzuka, however, Senna would have still won the title in Adelaide with Prost failing to win. Senna won his third title in 1991, yet again at the penultimate round at Suzuka, in a much more comfortable and far less dramatic fashion than the previous 2. With medals, he takes his 4th title and once again at Suzuka. Nigel Mansell stormed his way to the title in 1992 in the hugely innovative and futuristic Williams FW14B, securing it in Hungary with a record 5 races remaining. With medals, he secures his third title, and does so a round earlier in Germany, now from Senna instead of teammate Riccardo Patrese. In 1993, Alain Prost came out of retirement for one last hurrah and secured his fourth title in the equally innovative and futuristic Williams FW15C, securing it at the Portuguese Grand Prix with 2 rounds remaining. With medals, he takes his fifth title, 12 years after his first one round earlier in Italy. "1994 is one of the darkest years in Formula 1 history, which saw the deaths of Ayrton Senna and Roland Ratzenberger at the same race, as well as serious injuries for Rubens Barrichello, Karl Wendlinger and Andrea Montemini, which forced the FIA to make major improvements in safety standards. Michael Schumacher won his first title in controversial circumstances by colliding with Damon Hill at the final round in Adelaide, having dominated all year but being put on the back foot by being disqualified from 2 races and banned from 2 others. With medals, he wins it in a far less dramatic fashion 2 rounds earlier at Jerez. With this in mind, we can assume the collision in Adelaide would not have taken place. "1995 saw the rivalry between Michael Schumacher and Damon Hill continue, with them colliding a couple more times, but Schumacher still comfortably took his second title at Okayama with 2 rounds remaining. With medals, he wins the title a round earlier, now at his home race of the Nürburgring. At his third attempt, Damon Hill finally won the title in 1996, doing so at the final round in Japan from rookie teammate Jacques Villeneuve. With medals, he wins it 3 rounds earlier in Belgium. "1997 was a controversial year in which the title went down to the wire at Jerez between Jacques Villeneuve and Michael Schumacher, and after attempting to run Villeneuve off the track and in turn totalling his own car, Villeneuve went on to take the title and Schumacher was excluded from the championship. With medals, it still goes to Villeneuve, who clinches the title 2 rounds earlier at the Luxembourg Grand Prix. As with before, I think we can assume the collision and subsequent disqualification at Jerez would not have taken place. Mika Häkkinen won his first title in 1998 after a close battle with Schumacher that went down to the wire and ended after Schumacher ran over a piece of debris. With medals, Häkkinen still wins, and it still goes down to the wire, with Schumacher needing to win the final round at Suzuka in order to take it. Häkkinen successfully defended the title in 1999, now battling against Eddie Irvine and Heinz-Harald Frentzen after Schumacher crashed at Silverstone and broke his legs and missed 7 races, going down to the wire at Suzuka again. With medals, he wins it again, and it again goes down to the wire. So, with medals, the 90s ends up being a far less interesting decade, as there are no new champions, and it's only Häkkinen's titles that go down to the wire. And here is the medals tally at the end of the decade. In 2000, Schumacher finally toppled Häkkinen and McLaren and won his third title and gave Ferrari their first driver's title since Jody Scheckter in 1979, taking the title at the penultimate round at Suzuka. With medals, he wins it a round earlier at Indianapolis, and it's Ferrari's first driver's title since Didier Pironi in 1982. Schumacher took his fourth title with relative ease in 2001, doing so at the Hungarian Grand Prix with 4 races remaining. With medals it's the same, only now it's his brother Ralph who was runner-up. Schumacher tied with Fangio to take his 5th driver's title in 2002, doing so in an unprecedented fashion by finishing on the podium in every race and clinching the title at Magny-Cours with a record 6 races remaining. With medals, he wins it once again at Magny-Cours, at a point where no other driver has won more than a single race. Schumacher won his record-breaking 6th driver's title in 2003, but faced a strong challenge from Kimi Raikkonen and Juan Pablo Montoya, which meant it went down to the wire at Suzuka. With medals, Schumacher clinches the title 2 rounds earlier in Italy, and despite having the most podium finishes that year, Raikkonen drops from 2nd to 5th. Schumacher won his 7th title in 2004, clinching it in Belgium with 4 rounds remaining, having won 12 of the preceding 14 rounds. With medals, he clinches it a whole 3 rounds earlier at Silverstone with 7 races remaining, with just Jarno Trulli having won a race up to that point. Schumacher's reign came to an end in 2005, when Fernando Alonso took the title and became Formula One's youngest champion at that time, doing so at Interlagos with 2 rounds remaining. With medals, Alonso wins the title on 2nd places, not wins, coming from behind Kimi Raikkonen, who 3 times retired from the lead and gave the win to Alonso to take the title at the final round at Shanghai. This would have created a titanic battle in the final round, as Alonso would need to win, otherwise Raikkonen would be champion. Alonso successfully defended the title in 2006, but faced a strong challenge from Schumacher and took it at the final round at Interlagos. With medals, it goes down to the wire again, with both drivers tied on points, and Schumacher needing to win to be crowned champion, regardless of where Alonso finishes, whereas in real life he had to win with Alonso outside the points. In 2007, internal squabbles between the McLarens of defending champion Fernando Alonso and rookie Lewis Hamilton meant that the Ferrari of Kimi Raikkonen came from behind to take the title at the final rounds by 1 point from both drivers. With medals, it goes down to the wire again, and Alonso and Hamilton can both beat Raikkonen to the title if they win. Hamilton was taken out of contention early on, but Felipe Massa probably still would have been ordered to give up the win to Raikkonen to create a buffer to Alonso in 3rd. Lewis Hamilton took the title in 2008, doing so at the last corner of the last lap of the last race, with Felipe Massa being champion-elect for about 40 seconds. With medals, Massa becomes the first different champion in 19 years. Those of you who were watching in 2008 will remember what happened at Spa. You think Abu Dhabi was bad, you've seen nothing yet. Without that, Hamilton would have won the title at the penultimate round at Shanghai. Major rule changes in 2009 meant Honda were resurrected from the ashes as Brawn GP, with Jenson Button taking the title at the penultimate round at Interlagos after winning 6 of the first 7 races. With medals, he wins it 2 rounds earlier at Singapore in a very undramatic fashion in 5th, with title rivals Rubens Barrichello and Sebastian Vettel in 6th and 4th respectively. So, in the 2000s, there is only one different champion. Schumacher wins his titles even earlier, and 2005 goes down to the wire, but otherwise it's broadly the same. And here's the medals tally at the end of the decade. "2010 saw one of the closest title battles in history, with 4 drivers still in contention at the final round in Abu Dhabi, which eventually went to Sebastian Vettel. With medals, it is the closest battle yet, as Vettel and Alonso are tied on medals, but Vettel wins it on countback, with Alonso leading going into the final round and Mark Webber also in contention. Vettel won his 2nd title with ease in 2011, securing it at the Japanese Grand Prix with 4 rounds remaining. With medals, he takes the title 2 rounds earlier at Monza, with 6 races remaining, having at that point been off the podium just once, matching Schumacher's record from 2002 of 17 medals in a season. "2012 saw 7 different winners from the first 7 races, and a late comeback meant the title went down to the wire once again between Vettel and Alonso, with Vettel taking his first title. With medals, it goes to Vettel once again, but he wins it a round earlier at COTA, with Lewis Hamilton as runner-up, who twice retired from the lead. Vettel stormed his way to his 4th consecutive title in 2013 with a record-breaking 9 consecutive wins in the second half of the season, securing it at the Indian Grand Prix with 3 rounds remaining. With medals, he secures it 2 rounds earlier at the Korean Grand Prix with 5 rounds remaining. "2014 marked the advent of the hybrid era and saw Mercedes as the team to beat, with Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg battling closely and Hamilton coming out on top to take his second title at the season finale in Abu Dhabi, which employed a controversial double point system. With medals, he secures his first title 3 rounds earlier at the Russian Grand Prix. Hamilton took his 3rd title in 2015 at the United States Grand Prix with 3 rounds remaining. With medals, he secures his 2nd title a round earlier, once again at the Russian Grand Prix, matching Schumacher's and Vettel's 2002 and 2013 records of 17 medals in a season. "2016 was markedly closer, and after going down to the wire, saw Nico Rosberg take the title and then retire from the sport. With medals, Hamilton's run of 4 consecutive wins in the final rounds means he secures his 3rd consecutive title, with Rosberg leading going into the final round, with both drivers needing to win it. With this in mind, Hamilton more than likely would not have deliberately tried to back Rosberg into Sebastian Vettel and Max Verstappen behind, and Rosberg himself, having still not won the championship, probably would not have retired, but that's a subject for another video. A resurgent Sebastian Vettel and Ferrari were challenging Hamilton for the title in 2017, but a series of errors and mechanical problems in the second half meant Hamilton secured his 4th title at the Mexican Grand Prix with 2 rounds remaining. With medals, he wins his 4th consecutive title 1 round earlier at COTA. Vettel and Ferrari tried again in 2018, but once again their campaign fell apart in the second half of the season, and Hamilton took his 5th title at the Mexican Grand Prix once again, with 2 rounds remaining. With medals, he clinches his 5th consecutive title 2 rounds earlier with a dominant performance at the Japanese Grand Prix, which saw Vettel spin off early on. Hamilton took his 6th driver's title in 2019, seeing brief challenges from Valtteri Bottas, Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, none of which fully materialised, and he took the title at COTA with 2 rounds remaining. With medals, he clinches his record-breaking 6th consecutive title 3 rounds earlier at Sochi, with his 3 main rivals essentially just taking wins off one another. So, the 2010s are broadly the same, aside from Hamilton compensating for losing one championship by gaining another, with only 2 titles going down to the wire. And here is the medals tally at the end of the decade. "2020 was a turbulent year with a shortened and hastily prepared calendar due to the disruptions of the COVID-19 pandemic, which saw Hamilton cruise to his 7th title at the Turkish Grand Prix with 3 rounds remaining. With medals, he secures his 7th consecutive title a round earlier at Imola, and Pierre Gasly with his famous win jumps from 10th to 5th in the standings. "2021, and well, here it is. Now, I know what you're thinking, and no, Verstappen still wins the championship. One thing that did change in 2021 was the introduction of sprint races, which literally give the drivers medals, and are designed to have the same outcome as Bernie's proposed medal system. For the sake of this argument, I'm going to disregard sprint races and not count them. Obviously, 2022 is still ongoing, but here's how things currently look. It's looking very comfortable for Verstappen at the moment, and the earliest that Leclerc can take the lead in the championship is Spa, if he wins the next 3 races and Verstappen is third or lower in each. So, with medals, there's quite a mix-up to the sport's history. Mike Hawthorne, John Surtees, Denny Hulme, Jody Scheckter, Nelson Piquet, Keke Rosberg and Nico Rosberg are all no longer champions, and Stirling Moss, Didier Pironi and Felipe Massa are all new champions. Jim Clark gains 2 titles, Niki Lauda loses 2, Mario Andretti and Alan Jones both gain 1, Alain Prost loses 2 but gains 3 others, Nigel Mansell gains 2, Ayrton Senna gains 1, and Lewis Hamilton loses 1 but gains another. The runaway championships become even more runaway, and we're denied a lot of the sport's most iconic moments, but in return are potentially given many more, with several championships being set up with a race to victory in the final round. As entertaining as many races could have been, it's still a very unfair system that punishes consistency and gives no rewards if you can't finish on the podium, leaving drivers such as Nico Hülkenberg with a 10-year career and nothing to show for it. Clark's 2 extra championships are well deserved, as whenever he finished a race he almost always won, and Prost's consistency initially works in an era with terrible reliability, but he meets his match in the form of the hyper-aggressive Nigel Mansell and Ayrton Senna, where his modus operandi of thinking about the long game and settling for second instead of risking first does him no favours. So, to end, here is a complete medals table accurate as of the 2022 Austrian Grand Prix. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Brook_F1. A huge shout out and thank you as ever to my Patreon subscribers Alex Forstemans, Ypsilon2643 and Valentine Frank, and I'll see you all next time.